Weedsport alumni Dr. Paul Parkman and his wife Amarina Linardi have recently moved back to the area after many years in Washington, D.C. They graduated in 1950, Amarina as a valedictorian and Dr. Paul as a salutatorian. They connected and found love during high school and have been together since. Dr. Parkman graduated from college and then he signed up for the military service through the doctor's draft. He was assigned to Fort Dix, and it was there that he was able to work with a team of scientists that ultimately developed the measles mumps rubella vaccine that has saved millions of lives. The couple have fond memories of attending Weedsport in their early years. In this video, I took some time to find out how their time in Weedsport schools ultimately impacted the rest of their lives.
What was the best part of high school? Well, I think that I really liked, I didn't like a lot of high school, but I liked, one of our teachers was very, very good, and because of her, I think I liked Latin.
And I liked high school. I liked school in the first place, and I liked the courses I was taking. I was in a
Commercial?
I don't know what it was called.
Business education.
Yeah,
Business ed, yeah,
Yeah.
business education.
Yeah.
Well, we were put on the.
We probably met in first grade or kindergarten or whatever the first.
Well, that's true because we went through school together. So we weren't always in the same class, but most of the time, and we didn't think there was anything special about us.
No, we didn't, pay attention early on.
No.
Not until a lot later.
It wasn't until the senior year, probably.
Yeah, it was the senior year, and I think what really did it was we worked on the yearbook together.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yes.
And that was what made the difference.
Yeah.
We knew we were in love then.
Clubs. You sang. You were in Glee Club.
Yeah, that must have been the only one that I was involved in that I could. Oh, I didn't. They didn't have a business club or anything, so it must have been just Glee Club.
I think it was that, and then we were in band. We were in band, so if that counts as a club. Well, he didn't. I don't know. I don't think he gave it a lot of thought.
No, I think.
I mean, you just try and do the best you can, and to get along and.
To do well in school. I mean, it was always important to me to study and to get good grades, and I did work hard. I remember that my way of learning what was being taught in school was for me to write out, on paper. So I had tablets where I wrote out what we were studying about, the important things that we were studying, so I could do well when they gave the tests. Yeah. And I did do well, but that was a way that I learned. I mean, people learn to do things in different ways, and my way of learning was to write something out, and it helped me to remember better. And it succeeded because I did do well in school.
Well, I'll tell you this little story about at least my idea of my career path was that my dad and I had a serious talk. We didn't have a lot of serious talks, but this was one probably when I was a sophomore in high school. And he said, we were out in the barn, and he said, we need to think about what you want to do. What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do? And he said, and I said, I couldn't think of anything. And he said, okay, well, how about, would you like to be a barber? And that didn't seem too good to me. I said, no, I don't think I'd make a good barber. I don't think I, and he had a couple of other possibilities. And the last one was, he said, would you like to be a doctor? And that, so I said, gee, that sounds really, yes, I want, that would be good, I want to do that. So I think that's what he wanted me to say, you know, because he knew I wouldn't be couldn't be a jovial, hail fellow, well-met barber. Not there's anything wrong with barbers, but I didn't fit that career path. And you,
I think that my mother wanted me to have an education, so I could earn a living if I needed to do that, because she had to work. I mean, they were a very poor family. Her mother died, she was Elmarina, and that's why I have that name. But her mother died very young, and I think there were 4 or 5 children that were living, and a couple of them had died before that had died when they were infants. And so my mother wanted to be sure that I had an education. My father wasn't so much interested. He didn't think that, I needed to have an education.
he said, the girls, they'll take care of themselves, their husbands will take care of them.
But
Is that right?
yeah, yes, that's what he thought. He said yes, but they were who was it? I'm trying to think of in Weedsport, the man who was their.
Charles Cusick.
Say that again.
Charles Cusick,
Cusick, yeah. Well, he was a
state representative,
state representative, but he was also
attorney.
an attorney, yes. And his wife was they were good friends with my parents, and they would go out to dinner with them some of the times. I remember because they had a good friendship. And his wife was the one who talked to my mother about my having an education, not just, going to work. And so I think that was the reason, and she was the one who knew about Catherine Gibbs, which existed for a long time. It was a school, mostly women were in it. I don't know whether any men were ever in it. And it was a school that taught, secretarial.
Secretarial work,
Yeah, mostly secretarial work. And there were it could be a 2-year course or a 1-year course. And I had the 1-year course, and it was in Boston. And so that's where I had to live and go to school every day. And I did very well in school there because I studied a lot. And I remember my parents came to visit us when we were there. And also Norma went to Catherine Gibbs also. The school existed for a lot of years, but it was a few years ago that I saw that it closed. There weren't enough probably people to attend because times have changed, and it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you couldn't find Catherine Gibbs if you wanted to. As an existing school, or you probably would have trouble finding anything to read about it. But if you went to Catherine Gibbs, that was a known secretarial school. And when I went to get a job, I looked at a couple places, but where was it that I went to first?
General Electric, was that the first time?
GE, I guess so. And because I had been to Catherine Gibbs, they put me in charge of a couple other secretarial people who were below me. And I was the one in charge of those ladies that also did secretarial work. But it was because I had that special education, a known name, Catherine Gibbs, as a secretarial school, that I was put in charge. Otherwise, I would have just, had to do what the others did. So that was a real plus. And then I worked. I guess I didn't go to work then after we moved to the Washington area.
You worked for your dad for a while, I think.
Yes. Oh, that's right. And he needed somebody in the office, and so I worked there. That's where I was working when we got married, wasn't it? Yeah.
I was accepted at St. Lawrence, and Albany, I talked to people at Albany, and they said, well, you already got accepted, so you don't need to come here. So I went to St. Lawrence University. I was pretty happy with it. I mean, it was cold and a lot of gray, like a little bit
was
like
it?
it was here. It is here. And I was, I studied, and I got through in 3 years. It wasn't until 1961. I was a soldier then. We were doing a clinical study, and they had sent us up to Fort Dix, the home of the ultimate weapon. Fort Dix was a big training post for soldiers and infantry. And so we were at Fort Dix, and we were doing this study, and we went to, it was a pretty dull study, actually. Most of these guys just had runny noses and so on. But one ward in this hospital had all the guys with rashes. And we said, we went around and made rounds. We went around and looked at the patients, and they said a lot of them, maybe 80–90% of them had German measles. And we thought, well, that's really interesting. So we took some specimens, throat swabs and other things, and took because we knew at that time that the German measles virus had never been isolated. It was known clinically, but it was never you couldn't get a virus from it. And so we thought, we ought to try. So a couple of us went to, when we went back to Walter Reed, where our base, did a lot of things in the laboratory to see if we could isolate German measles virus. And it was very discouraging because we did this and that and the other thing, all things that were known, and nothing worked. There were no signs of German measles in our cultures. And so we except one day, I had an idea. And the idea was maybe there was another. I had read about a technique that people had used for cold viruses, and it wasn't a very good test, but there was a test for cold viruses, and so I said, maybe if I use that on our German measles laboratory specimens, maybe that would tell us something. And so, sometime in 1961, Mal Artenstein, who was we were working together, I said to Mal, why don't we see if we can show this, we have some new technique to look for German measles virus. And so he said, fine. And so we went and we tried, and the first day, nothing, we didn't expect anything. And the second day, some of the cultures looked different. And then on the third day, we said, wow, they are really different. I wonder if we haven't isolated German measles virus. And of course, the answer was yes. It was amazing. To be able to do that was amazing. I still can't believe it. I still can't believe it that we were able to do that. And it means a lot. If once you can isolate the virus in a laboratory test tube, you can do lots of things. You can look for a vaccine, for example. And so that's among the other things we did with that German measles, was to look for possibilities for a vaccine. And it worked out. It all worked out. It was amazing. I tell you, I still can't believe how that,
Well, you worked
Changed my
hard.
life,
Well,
yeah.
it did, but you worked hard, and you thought of things to do
yeah,
that,
yeah.
when you were
Right.
working on it. But the interesting thing was that the Army wasn't interested in.
They weren't interested in German measles.
They weren't interested in developing a vaccine.
No, so we went over to a place that was interested, and that was the National Institutes of Health. It's in Bethesda, still is in the Bethesda, and it's a place where they encouraged you to do things like develop a vaccine.
So that's what took us to the Washington area,
Yeah.
was that because the Army wasn't interested in
No.
you're pursuing it, and you were interested in pursuing it, and found that in Washington they were interested in the research.
And so what it was 6 years later, the first vaccine manufacturer was licensed for vaccines for the vaccine for German measles, and since then, that was in 1960.
Four, was it,
Four,
or
maybe,
five?
not
Yeah.
54, 55.
And
The vaccine began to be used by commercial manufacturers, and it's now, it's virtually eradicated. There is no German measles for people to be afraid of now.
Well, I think that it's important to, when you're in school, to study and to do well in school. To get good grades, and also it's important to like what you're doing.